You know that we've entered a new era in the increasingly crowded Souls-like arms race when we're now turning classic children's stories into dark, twisted, bloodborne pseudo-sequels.
I've come to the conclusion that if a Souls-like game isn't made by FromSoft, it automatically has to have something wrong with it, according to IGN. Yeah, they'd find bizarre reasons to knock old Dark Souls games too, sometimes just for being too difficult, which they weren't. But as you can see with Elden Ring, which I'm sorry is not a perfect game, it easily secured a 10 from them. Now, I want to make this clear, I do not think Lies of P is a perfect game, and I am aware that they gave it an 8. My complaints are not about the score itself, more so the reasons they've chosen to give the game that score, which don't make any remote fucking sense. Unlike videos I've made on IGN in the past, I'm only going to be talking about a few things said in this review that, in my opinion, prove there is some kind of bias going on here. One thing that's bothered me a lot, not only from IGN, but anybody who's talked about this game, is the fact that it's just a Bloodborne clone. And while that's obviously not true at all, I don't even get the comparison. It's dark, and that's pretty much it. The gameplay is still quite different, the enemies are different, they're fucking puppets, and the comparisons we do see can also be seen in any Souls-like game. For some reason, they made a Dark Souls 3 comparison instead, but yeah, if this game was set in the day, I have a feeling this wouldn't be happening. I really find great annoyance in this, but believe me, the problems don't end there. I'm referring to the bosses, in which they basically call out the fact that Lies of P does not have one of the most hated elements from the Souls franchise.
It would have been nice to have one or two encounters where they mix things up with a puzzle or trick you've got to figure out to best your opponent.
So, I spent a long time thinking about what he might be referring to, and I guess he wants something that doesn't rely on skill. A boss that makes you figure it out instead, and then you basically win. In other words, gimmick bosses. Fucking gimmick bosses. You know, memorable stuff like the ancient wyvern that had you running about the area to land on its head. What about Nicolash, the boss you would chase for a long time, possibly get one-shotted, and then chase him again? Dark Souls had me bored to death until I finally got to the Bed of Chaos, in which its unique platforming design led to an experience like none other. Then again, you could just look to Demon's Souls, which clearly had the best bosses in the series, as it had more gimmicks than any other. The Storm King, Phalanx, Adjudicator, the undeniably fun Dragon God. Nothing says fun like dying over and over again because you didn't know where to stand, only to eventually hit the boss 3 times and win.
Those are always my favorite.
There's favorite. It's favorite. It's obvious there's no group opinion going on here. You'll commonly see the same people reviewing the same types of games, but why is somebody who loves gimmick bosses reviewing a Souls-like game? Granted, I know he doesn't refer to them as gimmick bosses, but I don't know what else that could mean. The game has an optional boss that becomes real easy if you drain the poison. I guess that's a gimmick, right? It's by no means good, but it's probably his favorite. But the complaints don't end there, as the true glaring flaw with Lies of P is it's unbalanced.
Shocking.
Now, this ties into the bosses too, but in very contradicting ways. On one hand, he says most bosses are too easy and easily beat by hiding under them and going to the back. Well, that's not true. I'm not gonna get into the boss design in this video, but it is by no means like Dark Souls. It's similar, but not the same thing, and for a good amount of them, running to the back will not guarantee victory. It's funny how Elden Ring gets called out for none of its boss design, because let's face it, it was very unbalanced toward the end, while Lies of P has to have gimmicks nobody likes for the sake of variety, and be just difficult enough so it's not impossible. You wanna know what else Elden Ring, Sekiro, and Bloodborne also did that did not get them criticized?
The result is a similar meta, where aggressive gameplay is encouraged. That keeps fights moving along at a quick pace, but it also discourages more defensive playstyles, which tend to be my go-to in Souls-likes.
That's right. Despite the bosses and the whole game just being too easy, it's also too hard because you have to play offensively.
Is this a joke?
Because when Bloodborne took away your shield and gave you a gun instead, that didn't encourage offensive gameplay. So what if Sekiro is a game when you have to be able to parry to win? Anybody can do that, it wasn't hard. I know Elden Ring does give you a shield and let you play defensively, but there are times when that's not the best idea. Unbalanced gameplay is not an issue in Lies of P any more than it is in any other Souls-like game. In fact, with Elden Ring, it was a much bigger issue there. I don't know what exactly this guy expects the game to be, some kind of perfect balance that doesn't exist, but I can guarantee gimmick bosses and harder difficulty is not gonna accomplish that, especially if you like playing defensively. He also complains about the game being too linear, which is a downside compared to other games, but it's also a design decision and not a valid complaint. Some people do like that, so it's up to you. It is funny how he starts out the review by saying it's a dark retelling of Pinocchio, as the original Pinocchio was very fucking dark, but IGN does seem to like modern Disney offerings, one of which being the most belittling thing toward women I've seen in a long time, so you can't expect them to know that. This review is essentially 10 minutes of your life wasted, in my case it's 20 as I had to watch it twice, but in this day and age, I really couldn't imagine taking this site seriously. Opposed to other videos I've made on IGN, this is not as problematic as Lies of P is still not a perfect game, but it's clear the only reason this game wasn't given a perfect 10 is it's not FromSoft and not as highly anticipated to the levels of Elden Ring. That game didn't deserve a 10 either, but it got one because of what it was, and that's as complicated as that gets. The review is not completely invalid, but the main points as far as negativity goes are completely untrue, and if I found out this guy never played the fucking game, I'd have no issue believing that. In fact, it would explain a lot. An 8 is definitely a fair score, but the reasons have to make sense, and making sense is not something that computes with IGN. By now, that's more than obvious. I'm the Game Analyst, and don't forget, the enjoyment of something does not matter so long as it's difficult, meaning the bed of chaos is now fun. Oh, what? You're actually here? That's fucking amazing. I guess you may as well check out the main channel, in which I discuss movies, TV series, and the offensive topics that lie within. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's right there.